My dream in life right now would be to sell this boot at square dancing class.
When Danielle Colby went square dancing on American Pickers, she was trying to make a sale.
Have you ever seen a 7-foot tall boot? I have one for sale.
But if you really know Danielle, you know her real passion is no do-si-do. It's knowing her alter ego, Danny Diesel.
On the morning of her 50th birthday, Danielle Colby sat in a car and told the internet that her life had collapsed. What she said in that video took 11 seconds. But what happened to Danielle in those 15 years, to her body, to the people she loved, and to the show that made her name, is the kind of story that makes 50 feel like the end of something instead of the beginning. What did 15 years of showing up cost her? And with all of it gone, what does she have left? Join us as we reveal the heartbreaking tragedy that hit Danielle Colby at 50. She built herself first.
I just realized that there's really no need for insecurity. It is a useless emotion in my world.
Before American Pickers had a network, Mike Wolfe was just a man with a truck and no real plan, filming some of it himself. What he did have was a small antique shop in Iowa, antique archaeology, and a problem. Someone needed to run it while he was on the road. But before she ever walked through his door, Danielle Colby was already someone. She grew up in Davenport, Iowa, in a Jehovah's Witness household. Strict, structured, not exactly a launch pad for a career in burlesque. She left the faith, moved to Chicago, and found her way into a roller derby team called the Big Mouth Mickeys. She played for 3 years until her body gave out from injuries. It was in Chicago that she saw a burlesque performance featuring comedian Margaret Cho and a dancer named Satan's Angel. And that was the night everything shifted. She moved back to the Quad Cities, built a troupe of 9 women called Burlesque Le Moustache, and started performing under the name Danny Diesel. She also opened a vintage clothing boutique 4 miles to Memphis, first in Iowa, then in Chicago's Wicker Park. It's important to note that all of this happened while she was raising 2 children, moving through 2 marriages that did not last, and watching the boutique she had built eventually close. The burlesque never closed. That was the one thing she had started that kept going, no matter what else fell away. By the time Mike Wolfe found her at that yard sale, she was not someone who needed a television show to have a story. She already had one. The two had actually crossed paths years earlier, at a yard sale in Mike's hometown. Danielle had been eyeing a lamp when Mike walked over and bought it before she had a chance. She called him out on it. He said the time to buy something is the moment you see it. And apparently, she filed that away, because years later, when he offered her a job, she said yes. Danielle spent 5 years working at the shop and helping Mike build his picking business before she ever agreed to appear on television. When the History Channel eventually came on board and the show launched in January 2010, viewers were introduced to the tattooed woman in the office who tracked down leads, managed the store, and kept things running while the men were on the road. American Pickers launched to 3.8 million viewers, the kind of number that turns a cable show into a cable phenomenon overnight. Danielle was not the one doing the picking in those early episodes, but she quickly became one of the most talked about people on the show. Over the following years, as the show grew, so did her role. She moved from the office to the road. She brought burlesque history and vintage fashion into segments that no other picker show was touching, and audiences noticed. Mike described her as his best friend, and said their families had become too intertwined to ever separate. She said the same, described him as a brother she had not chosen, but would not trade. Outside the show, she performed burlesque as Danny Diesel, the Queen of Rust, and built her own clothing line. By the time the show was deep into its run, she had made something that did not depend on the show to exist: her own following, her reputation, her name, not underneath anyone else's. While she was building all of it, American Pickers was going through something that would leave a mark on everyone involved. There had been 3 of them at the start: Mike, Danielle, and Frank Fritz. Frank had been Mike's road partner, the other half of the picking duo, the one who made the show feel like a buddy road trip. And then he was gone. It came apart the way things between old friends do. No single moment you can point to, until suddenly there is nothing left. What happened between Frank, Mike, and the network was messy, and Danielle was about to make it messier. But what did Danielle actually do? And did she understand what she had stepped into? The friend she couldn't save. Frank had been Mike's picking partner since long before the cameras arrived. They had known each other most of their lives, and on screen it showed. Then it stopped showing, and nobody at the network said a word about it. Frank left the show during season 21 in 2020 with no announcement. Mike posted something on social media confirming Frank would not be returning. He said he would miss him and wished him well. Frank had a different version. In July 2021, he gave an interview where he said the two had not spoken in over 2 years. He also suggested that Mike had been quietly positioning his own brother Robbie as a replacement long before Frank left, which Frank was essentially saying, this was not a departure. It was an exit arranged without him. Danielle did not stay quiet. She posted a photo of herself and Mike on the road, called him her best friend and her big brother, and said she supported him fully. She also addressed Frank directly. She wrote that he had caused pain for himself over the years and that she hoped he got the help he needed. He had been dealing with alcohol dependency and back injuries, but the deeper problem was what Mike said publicly while Frank was already down. In August 2021, while Frank was telling reporters he was 11 months sober, Mike went on record saying Frank was going through a lot with his addictions and that he just could not get it right. Frank disputed it. 11 months later, when Frank suffered his stroke, Mike announced it on Instagram, and Frank's camp was reportedly unhappy that he had. It was not a lawsuit. It was something harder to resolve than that. 2 men who had known each other since middle school, each telling a different version of the same story, while one of them was no longer well enough to fight back. He was 58 when it happened. By the time he was found, he had been alone on the floor of his home for some time. He spent the following 2 years in care, unable to communicate clearly, with a close friend serving as his legal guardian. According to Mike, they said what needed to be said. He pulled up old photos on his phone, and he said it was emotional. They even cried. Frank Fritz died on September 30th, 2024. He was 60 years old. Mike announced it on Instagram the same night, writing that he had known Frank for more than half his life, and that he had been there beside him when he took his last journey home. Danielle posted her own tribute. She said she would miss his laugh, his love of tattoos, his collections, and the moments when he let his guard down and was vulnerable with her. She called him her road dog and told him to rest in peace. Months later, she said she loved her time with him most, before addiction took hold. After that, she said, it was very difficult, but she never stopped loving who he had been. While all of that played out in public, Danielle had said nothing about what was quietly happening to her own body. Sick and still showing up. During the run of American Pickers, Danielle was dealing with a medical problem she kept mostly to herself. It began as pain she tried to manage on set, irregular and uncontrollable bleeding, constant physical discomfort that made doing her job harder than anyone watching would have guessed. She had mentioned it privately to Letitia Klein, who was in a relationship with Mike at the time. Letitia pushed her to see a doctor. Danielle found a female gynecologist, went in for multiple exams, and received a diagnosis that explained everything she had been living with. She had uterine fibroids, non-cancerous growths that had become so large and so advanced that a biopsy was not even possible before surgery. The fibroids had to come out, and because of how severe the situation had become, her uterus had to come out with them. She had known she was not well for about 3 years before anyone outside her closest circle knew a thing about it. The fibroids had been growing that entire time. Before surgery, her doctor had her come in for iron infusions twice a week, just to stabilize her enough to operate. In October 2022, she underwent a full hysterectomy. She announced it publicly, posted from the hospital in a surgical mask, holding up a Dunkin' coffee cup, grateful and exhausted at the same time. The recovery was worse than she admitted on screen. She wrote on Patreon that she had lost her desire to work entirely, that it was an emotionally taxing time, and her body was not cooperating with the pace she wanted to keep. A year later, she was still describing it, writing that there had been a heaviness, a sadness to the entire year after the hysterectomy, that she had leaned on friends to get through. The biopsy came back clean, no cancer. She returned to the show as if none of it had happened. Then, in December 2023, the pain came back, different this time. She described it as incredible pain through her face, jaw, ear, neck, arm, and hand on her right side. The diagnosis was a severe case of trigeminal neuralgia, a condition that sends electric shock waves of pain through your face, triggered by something as small as brushing your teeth or putting on makeup, and a tumor in her face was the cause. She announced the surgery the same day she had it. Days later, she posted that the pain throughout her entire body that had been preventing her from doing so much was almost gone, down to 2 or 10% of what it had been. She recovered again, returned, said nothing about how close the edges had been getting. For the first time in 2 years, her body was hers again. What she did not know was that the worst week of her life was about to begin. Married on Monday, grieving by Friday. Danielle and Jeremy Shush had known each other for 10 years before they got married. He had been there through the fibroids, the surgery, the grief, steady, and not looking for credit for it. The wedding happened in February 2024 in Puerto Rico, the island where both of them had made their home. The ceremony was held on the edge of a mountain. She wore a powdery blue backless gown with a wild, colorful bouquet and an intricate headpiece. Jeremy stood in a darker blue suit. After everything, the surgeries, the grief, the years of building something out of nothing, that week was finally just theirs. She wrote about it afterward, in words that did not sound like someone performing happiness. She wrote that standing on the edge of that mountain, surrounded by the people she loved, she was the happiest she had ever been in her life. That same week was full of moments she could not explain, small things that kept happening. A warmth she could not account for, as if someone was present who was not in the room. That someone was Papa John. John Shuch, Jeremy's father. He had not been able to travel. He was thousands of miles away, trying to heal, and so the week of the wedding happened without him there, but Danielle said she felt him in it anyway. In sunsets, in moments of warmth, in the texture of things she could not fully explain. For more than 40 years, John Shuch had played Santa Claus to children in his community. He died of cancer on February 19, 2024, at 70, just 5 days after the wedding. The newlyweds flew from Puerto Rico to Kansas City before the day was over. Danielle announced it publicly on a Tuesday with a photo of herself and Jeremy sitting on a porch with his parents. Papa John was there beside them, their small dog in his arms. Nobody in that photo knew it would be the last one. Her tribute to him was long. She described the first time she ever met him. In an airplane hangar he had converted into the North Pole for a terminally ill child. He had done it to give that child a real Christmas. She said he was that kind of person. Someone who used special occasions not for himself, but to give something to whoever needed it most. She wrote that it had taken her years to fully open up to him, and that some of her most beautiful memories were the ones they made once she did. She wrote that it had been painful to move forward with the wedding, knowing he was not well enough to be there. She and Jeremy had cried about it more than once during the week. and yet everything around them was full of moments that felt like him. She ended the tribute by telling him to rest. Jeremy posted separately. He shared a childhood photo of himself as a small boy in a red jacket, standing in the front yard with a much younger version of his father. He wrote that John Schuch was the best dad he could have ever asked for and that he was heartbroken. In the comments, he added that he was grateful to have the best wife beside him through it. Danielle replied to his comment. Her heart hurt for him and his family, she wrote. Papa John had taught her about being of service, about holding space for others. She said she felt him everywhere, especially when she was next to Jeremy. She had buried her father-in-law. She had married the man she loved. And her body was not finished with her yet. She had survived all of it. So why did she end up sitting in a car on her 50th birthday, telling strangers she didn't know what came next? 50 and back to zero. December 3rd, 2025, was Danielle's 50th birthday. She filmed a vlog of the day, breakfast out with Jeremy, a few presents, nothing staged or elaborate. Then, partway through the video, she told her followers something she had just found out herself. American Pickers was done. She said it plainly, sitting in the car with Jeremy. She did not know what was going to happen. She did not know how she was going to make things work financially. She had just turned 50, and she was saying it to her phone camera in a car on her birthday because there was nobody at the network calling to tell her. She had spent 15 years on the show. It had been her income, her structure, the thing that gave shape to everything else. And now it was gone. Without American Pickers, she had no steady income. She had a museum she had just opened, the Ecclesiast Arts Museum, at 322 Brady Street in downtown Davenport. The items inside were an accumulation of over 20 years of her own personal collection. Her son Miles had helped build the risers. Her daughter, Memphis, had painted. Jeremy had built the space with them. International burlesque star Minnie Tonka flew in from New York to teach at the opening. It was the only institution of its kind left in the United States. The Burlesque Hall of Fame Museum in Las Vegas had closed in July 2025, 4 months before Danielle's birthday. She was now the last custodian of an entire art form's history. And she was sitting in a car, not knowing how to pay for it. She asked her followers for luck. The History Channel confirmed existing episodes would air into 2026 and that no new episodes were in production. Mike had a new solo show called History's Greatest Picks with Mike Wolf, launching in February 2026. The show was being restructured around Mike's new project rather than shut down completely. 2 days after her birthday post, Mike called and reminded her that the show was never completely over. Things were still happening, and her comment had come more from the loss of her paycheck than from any official announcement. She went back on Instagram and walked it back. She clarified. But no clarification changed what that video showed. A woman, 50 years old, sitting in a car on her birthday, with no answer and no one calling. In that second video, she talked about what 18 years with Mike had actually taught her, that you can stay in conflict with someone without destroying the relationship, that opposition and collaboration can exist at the same time. She called him one of her best friends. Their families were too intertwined, she said, to ever fully separate. On December 31st, 2025, she performed at the Adler Theater in Davenport as Danny Diesel, the Queen of Rust, hosting a New Year's Eve burlesque show for a crowd that came specifically to see her. She had just turned 50. The show, the other one, was gone, and she still had a crowd. 15 years. And the call telling her it was over came on her birthday, not before. So where is the line between loyalty and getting used? And then 2 months after the show ended, Mike launched his own solo project without Danielle. After 18 years, Was she his best friend or his backup plan? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.